So, today, actually, I watched a TED Talk, and it was about what is consciousness, okay? I know we're diving into the deep end here, but it was about what is consciousness, and one of the main points that the speaker made was that your perception of the world is not just based on your sensory input. It is based on your sensory input and prediction of what the world should be. Okay, so for instance, if you see a car that's like near you and then a car that's farther down the road, your sensory input, your vision, sees that car that's farther down the road as a lot smaller. But your predictive part of your brain tells you, no, I've seen this before. That car is actually just farther away. It's not necessarily a lot smaller. Okay, so that's just an example of how those two work together to form what you perceive as reality. And as an interesting side note, when your predictive part outweighs your sensory part, or it gets, the predictive part takes over, that's called hallucination. Yeah. It's cool stuff. I'll definitely link that in the description. It's a very interesting TED Talk. I recommend watching it after this video. So, how does that relate to music? What are we even talking about? Come on. So, basically, it relates to music in that we're talking about like context of music. Okay. So we're talking about like context and how that can actually shape what you hear. How, like, what you hear in a song leading up to a certain point, that provides you with some predictive information, and then when that thing hits, you get sensory input of, like, what the actual sound is at that moment, but you also have predictive input of what it should sound like based on what the other stuff was, and if those two things are completely contrasting, then it'll sound weird and out of left field. If those two things are in perfect harmony, then it'll sound natural and smooth, maybe even boring if it's too predictive, right? And sometimes you can even fill in stuff that wasn't there based on that predictive stuff, and I'll show you that now. So, the reason why I didn't post a video last week is because I was at summer camp, Boy Scout summer camp, and I brought this along with me. This is my little travel guitar that I bring on a lot of camp outs. I never play it otherwise, I guess, except for now. But basically, a couple years ago, the E string broke on the top, and I was like, it's not really worth replacing. I mean, the actual like mechanism for the tuning peg is actually gone, so I don't even know if I can. Like, I'm sure you could get the part, but it's not worth it. And so one of the things that not having a top E string means is that when you play a standard, root position, well, not root position, but standard position D major chord, you're actually not playing a D major chord. You're playing a D power chord. There's no third. You're not playing a third. It's just A, D, A, D, or D, A, D if you just do the top three with that top E missing, and so it was still sounding major though, I was playing like in G major and stuff, so it was still sounding like a major chord, and that makes sense kind of because it's in context, but it really does strikingly actually sound like a major or a minor chord. It's not like it's ambiguous but it fits. It's like it really does sound like a major or a minor chord even if that third isn't there. So I'm going to show you that with major and minor, so we'll look at minor first. So I don't know about you, but that very distinctly sounded like a D minor chord. It's almost like my brain was filling in that middle note. And that kind of makes sense because I was playing an F chord, and that obviously has an F in it. So, my brain's hearing that D major chord, and it's like, oh, there's something missing. Like, normally I hear three notes, and normally there's that note in the middle. According to my most recent experience of a note right there, that was an F. I just heard an F, so that's probably an F, so then it kind of fills that in. And so if we do it with major, So there again, that sounded very distinctly major this time. And again, it's almost like you're filling in that extra note. And in that case, it's not as direct because you don't get an F sharp from a G major chord. But you do know from past experience listening to music that if I start on a G major chord, there should be an F sharp in the key, not an F, most likely. And so when I go and play that D, my brain's like, okay, well, it should be an F sharp, you know, based on past experience, predicting what should be there, you see? So, yeah, I just thought that was really interesting, that your brain kind of fills in the extra note based on that past experience, mirroring what that guy talked about in his TED Talk of how you combine your sensory input, which is, you know, how you're hearing the chord actually being played, the D major power chord, and then your prediction and combining that into a reality of either hearing a D minor or a D major chord. Thanks for watching. That was just a little bit about, you know, context and how that can make you hear stuff. Obviously, there's tons more examples of this, how you can, like, play a scale all the way up to, like, the 6th or the 7th, and then you're like, oh, it needs to go farther, and that kind of thing, because you predict that it should go farther, because normally it does. And then, you know, there's all sorts of stuff like this. You know, basically any kind of build-up in music is exploiting this predictive and sensory pairing that makes our consciousness. But that was just an interesting example, connected it to, like, you know, a bunch of things that I saw and noticed. So there you go. Next week there will be a video. I want to make that clear. But the week after that, there's no video, and that will be because next week on Wednesday I'm having back surgery. So I'll have a video that I'll post next Thursday that I'll, like, you know, schedule the upload, whatever. But the week after that, probably nothing. Maybe something minor, but probably not much. So yeah, there you go. Just letting you know. Thanks for watching. Bye.